Okie doke. Hi, everybody. Welcome. It is November 19th, 2023, believe it or not, and this is Thrive. And thank you for being here. So glad that y'all are joining us, whether you're here live or not. So let's all take a moment and just open our space together. So wherever you're at, if it's comfortable for you, you can close your eyes, settle into the body a bit, just take a few breaths and begin to let your breath kind of bring you into this physical moment in space and time that you inhabit right now. You might just notice the physicality of what you're sitting on or standing on. Notice the physical sensations of your breathing as your lungs expand and contract inside of your torso. And we'll be working a lot with the energy today. So for now, just imagine that each breath is just a gentle invitation back into the moment, a gentle, like a lighthouse, kind of just steady pulsing, showing, feeling, sensing, holding this embodiment of here and now, but holding it open just as a possibility that your energy might want to flow towards. And as we coalesce in our own centers in this way, I call out to the helping spirits to please be here with us. I call out to you, ancestral helping spirits, you who lived and died well and knew what it was to face the challenges of a human life and somehow managed to thrive. And in that thriving, to push forward the growth and the transformation and the evolution of your gifts. And in that way that you pushed towards your own growth through challenge, you push your people towards growth and you push your cosmology and your community and by extension your land and your ecosystem towards growth. And you served the growth and the thriving of life around you. You who hold that knowledge and that experience and are able to return to us as the truly reconciled ancestral helping spirits that we need you to be at this time. Please be here with us now and hold us well. Please gather around us in this space and stand at our backs and help us to know that we are already standing on your shoulders, whether we know it or not, and that we already have your support and just kind of lean in a little more so that we feel a little extra emphasis on that feeling of being supported, on that feeling of being seen and witnessed in our own particular challenges and in this challenge of this particular time in which we are alive on the planet. And help us to feel how the descendants, all those that are coming, whether those are blood or some other just earthly relationship or lineages that we may pass forward, just that quality of being incarnate, all the descendants are calling us into our growth in this moment. Help us to feel supported and held inside of that web that transcends time and space. We call out to you, helping spirits in all your many unique faces and forms, and particularly the ways in which the elements can come forward as helping spirits. You who are also ancient ancestors, earth and air, fire and water, please be here with us and hold us well and gather around and be alive and animate within our circle today. And please help us to really feel that you are also here for us and here with us and already co-creating us and already showing us, even if we don't quite know how or consciously attend to it, whether our lives are in balance elementally or not, and showing us the ways in which we might be a little out of balance. Please help us to just kind of be held in that discomfort as we discover those places today and lean into the small acts of power that can move us towards growth in that area. I call out to you, spirits of the lands and the great spirits of these lands where each of us reside, and to the ancestral helpers that tend these places and the helping spirits that tend the places where we live. from the smallest sprites of grass and plants and insects and microbes, even to the biggest, most extravagant land features, the ancient prairies and forests, to those primordial landscapes that still exist in spirit, even if they are physically altered at this time, knowing that they are so old and so ancient that they tend to actually come back, even if, many, many hundreds of years of craziness ensue. They will definitely be the ones that outlive us. So we call out to you all of this whole majestic network of life that we call land. And we ask you to be here with us and hold us well in our work today. And just help us to feel resourced. Help us to feel that we live in land, that we are land spirits ourselves, that we are of nature and not separate. And help us to feel into those places where we might feel pretty freaking separate, and the discomfort and the pain and whatever arises from that. Help us to feel that it is worth it to lean in there. And it is actually medicine to feel those unfelt things and stretch across those gaps. Medicine that we can then turn around and offer to all of life. And as these energies gather around us, I invite you to just imagine that we are being held in this circle of love and support. And invite you to feel into in the center of our circle and imagine that in this non-local space we claim in cyberspace, that there is a blazing fire in our circle. Not blazing out of control, not a wildfire, but just a campfire. And fire, we honor you there in the center of our circle. And we ask you to be here with us and hold us. Fire, who I know as Grandfather Fire, ancient elder, oldest ancestor of all that are incarnate. Please be here with us and hold us well and help us to feel warmed by the connections that we make in this work. And help us to feel the resonance between you, primal, elemental fire, and the fire that we hold, each of us, the fire that we are each here to tend, that spark of the oneness that is ours to be responsible for and to nourish. Please help us to feel that resonance. And as we step up to the fire, I invite you to imagine that you're entering sacred space and let your body naturally adjust to that quality of being in sacred space and the ways that it knows how. And also just let your body adjust to the quality of being in space with other people, which may or may not be sacred, just baseline human space. And as we three who are here live step up, imagine also that we're opening up a little bit of a space for those that are going to join us from the recording, which may be 2 to 3 more. So really letting, though let's give a little more space because there might be a few more, maybe 3 to 6 or something, letting that jostling happen across space and time, just opening. It's still a closed circle and it is still safe and held in that way. But there is space for those that are going to come and join via the recording later. And as you open to that imagining and that felt sense of coming into this space, I invite you to just open to, no, actually, we'll do that later. Just open to also an imagining of the spirit of technology. And we welcome that spirit into the center of our circle as well. That spirit that is sort of like a young great grandchild of fire. That is this spirit that holds all of these magical tools with which we connect over time and space. The Zoom, the laptops, all of that wild stuff, all of the information technology that makes that possible. And just imagine the shape, the texture, the quality with which that spirit of technology appears for you above fire or within fire, or dancing around fire. And just make any honorings or gratitudes for the spirit of technology that will help things to continue to flow well throughout the next 3 hours that we spend here together and help us to actually be able to access the recordings later at any time in which they would be supportive. And as you welcome your helpers and acknowledge everyone else kind of welcoming their own personal, unique helpers into the circle, just take a moment to land in that energy, that quality. May what needs to be said be said. May what needs to be heard be heard. And may these proceedings move forward in a way that is good for life. Alrighty, and when you feel ready, you can shift out of that intuitive space. We'll chat briefly and then we'll just kind of dive into our first exercise. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. It's such a pleasure to spend this time with you on a Sunday afternoon. Um, so a couple things right at the beginning. So lay of the land is that we'll dive in next to our Qigong, our movement practice, and then that will move kind of seamlessly into our meditation, our first meditation. And so we'll do all of that for maybe about 40 minutes total. And then we'll come out and do some discussion, some making some context there. And then probably around that time, we'll maybe take a little bit of a break, hopefully towards like a halfway point, like a 5 minute comfort break. And then we'll come back, we'll do more discussion, and then we'll do a second chapter of movement and meditation, and then we'll close. And so throughout class, at pretty much at any time, you're encouraged to ask questions. Or if you just have something that you want to share, feel free to share it. And it's a small group, so just feel free to unmute yourself and speak up there. And though I would ask that during the movement and meditation, hold your questions to the end because we want those recordings to be kind of like useful as resources afterwards. And if there's any question that you want to ask during the discussion periods or just something you want to share in the container, but you don't want it to be on the recording, that's totally cool. Just let me know and I'll pause the recording during that period. So that's a totally available to you as an option at any time. And as we move forward, just try to take care of yourself as best as you can. If you hit capacity with the screen, maybe just shift to listening to the audio. If you have to multitask, if whatever it is that you need to do to take care of yourself, if you need to take a break, if you need to bow out, just feel empowered to take care of yourself as best as you can, specifically body, because that's what we're kind of focused on today, and always. And then I wanted to also just give permission. So feel free to share this recording with housemates, with family members, with people that you share physical space with later on. If you, after the end of the workshop, you're like, oh, this would actually be really cool, or I want to practice with, some folks that I'm living with or that I'm sharing space with regularly, I'm super cool with that. If it's someone that's like outside of that local sphere for you, then just send them to me. Um, so that I can kind of tend that transition with the circle itself. So, but don't feel like it has to be this hermetically sealed thing like, oh no, you can't come in my room while I'm listening to the Qigong later or something like that. It's more like an agreement that we are in kind of this sacred container for this season. But I think that, people that we share physical space with, they kind of are already kind of in that boundary to a certain degree, especially family members or someone like that. So chosen family too. Yeah, so I think without further ado, then let's just go ahead and move into some movement, unless there are any questions right out the gate. Okay, cool. Let's move the body. So, um, for whatever reason, seeing me is not as important in my perspective as hearing me. And so I'm gonna kind of adjust my camera here, but I would, especially if you're joining us later or you're coming back to this as a reference, I would not get too caught up on like what I look like on screen, and I would more focus on listening for the words as they land in your body, and then making sense of them to the degree that you can from there. Because the Qigong, the intuitive movement, is about the sensation, the feeling, especially this style. So, yeah. But do stand up if you're able. And if you're not able, you can also do this seated or lying down. So feel free to just kind of explore to your ability and capacity and make transition as you need to. And just check that you have some space around you to move your arms out to their furthest reach. So, as best you can. And if you live in a really small space, no worries, just make it work, whatever you can do. Okie doke. And find your center place and just take a few breaths, coming back to that space where we were breathing, just with that quality of the tidal attraction in and out from the lungs and the breath and the energy. And shift your weight back and forth, side to side, and rock onto the heels and the toes and the sides of the feet. And experience how your body wants you to orient relative to the weight. Notice all those micro adjustments that your body, particularly your feet and your legs, make without conscious input for the most part. Honor that. That's a great gift of body. And when you feel steady, soften into your knees and just kind of move through a few bounces or jiggles or shakes, maybe bouncing up and down through the knees, maybe gyrating a little bit from the hips to spine, shaking from side to side or back to forth, or maybe into some gentle twists, left to right, if that feels good. And if it stays pretty gentle and subtle, great. But if it feels like it wants to be a little bigger of a shake, a vibration, or something that's maybe a little more intuitive that I'm not describing, just let that happen with the intention of really bringing us into physical presence, bringing us into physical sensation, and maybe shaking loose anywhere that things feel unnecessarily held or tense. And since we're all muted, if you feel like you want to sigh it out with sound or vibration, feel free to do that. Ha, or a or a lip flutter. Nice. And then come back to relative stillness and just breathe with that. And we'll move into our first form. So I invite you to make a bow, just a simple gesture, maybe one hand over one fist, bowing to the tradition, the lineages that have brought these practices forward. And then place one hand at belly and one hand up as if you were taking an oath. But really, this is just about stepping into the river of practice. All the teachers and students that have carried these practices forward in a good way, that have guided them in their evolution. We now step into that river, only receiving the wisdom of the practices. Nothing more, nothing less. And then we'll move into our first form. So relaxing the arms at the side, soft bend of the knees, start to sweep the arms out and up, palms facing up. As slowly as you dare, as slowly as you're capable of at this time without stress. Letting the hands come together gradually as if you were holding a beach ball above your head, a big orb of energy. And then gently pull that energy down in front of your body, but imagine that the energy is actually moving inside. You're welcoming the energy through the crown of your head, down through your torso, down through your leg. When the hands get about the top of your thighs, you can spread them gently out to the side. So we move back into our crouch and begin again, sweeping the palms to turn up. The legs, if you're doing the crouch, you can slowly straighten the legs as the hands come up to their highest point. And if the legs bending doesn't feel good in your back, you can keep the legs straight. or if you're seated. But continue to move through this circuit on your own, moving at a pace that is slow for you, but again, not forced or restrictive. Just challenging the mind, challenging the body to go a little slower than maybe you habitually would. And as you repeat this motion of opening the arms to the side, imagine that your palms are huge baskets and that they have kind of a magnetic quality of as well, that they're actually drawing energy in from the environment, from the healthy aspect of the ecosystem, the earth, the elements, the sky, the land. That as you gather that energy above your head, it creates sort of like a density, a little more tangibility, and then you pull the energy down into your body. And just with the ease with which you breathe, you're welcoming that energy in, letting it ease out anything that now qualifies as waste, anything stagnant or stale or not yours, anything that no longer resonates. Pushing that back down through your legs into the earth to be recycled and restored. And we just move through this over and over on our own, moving at the slow pace of the breath, breathing nice and easy. Legs coming up to straight at the top of the arm reach, and then down into the crouch as you bring the hands down, if that feels good in your body and doable. Letting it feel easy, organic, fluid. One of the traditional names of this form is waterfall. So just kind of imagining that you are kind of a water feature yourself. You're really showering yourself with new energy, cleansing from within any of the old that needs to leave. But remembering if you're not super sure or confident about the movement, the feeling and the imaginal sense is most important. So it's not so much about the technical accuracy right now. It's more about just that feeling of cultivating newness, receiving freely given energy or chi from the environment. Nice. We'll do this one more time. Beautiful work. And from the bottom, we'll start to transition. So bring your hands back towards the center. This time, palms facing down, a few inches below your belly button. And then start to skim the hands out to the side, gradually straightening the arms while coming into a soft bend in the knees. Arms come out to their furthest reach to the side, palms still facing down. And then slowly straighten the legs as you skim the hands back in towards the center line. As if you were standing in front of this long iron board and you're trying to smooth out a sheet, but really, really soft and subtle, this sheet of silk. Or standing in the surface of water at about waist height and trying to skim your palms along the surface of the water without disturbing it. And the trick, if you're synchronizing or seeking to with the legs and the arms, is to get the legs to come to their deepest bend when the arms are reaching as to their furthest reach out to the side. but without making that stressful. And then the legs straighten at the same rhythm and pace as the hands come into the center. So it's this gentle upwards and downwards motion. You're pulsing like a really slow piston or a battery. And so imagine as the hands go out and you move down into your bend or your horse stance, if you're familiar with that, that you're starting to resonate with the yang quality of energy, expressive, warm, bright, light, expansive, and diffuse. And then as you draw the hands back in, you're resonating more with the yin, that inwards pull, contraction, darkness, stillness, silence, healthy solitude, coolness, and dampness. So you become that tidal beacon, like we talked about, that's constantly pulsing out and then pulling itself back together, back in. Expressing out in the world and then coming back into solitude to receive what happened, to make sense of the experience from within. And in this way, we harmonize or seek to harmonize with the environment, which is always moving at that pace, at that quality, with that intelligence of yin moving into yang, moving back into yin forever and ever. We're bringing ourselves out of the contemporary, constant growth and constant expression and constant, courting burnout because we don't have resourcing. Moving out of those contemporary stories and frequencies into a more earth-based, primordial story. The story with which nature is always operating. Yeah, beautiful work. Do one more cycle of these. It's just starting to rain where I am at this time. So there's kind of a beautiful, soft, cool winter rain quality coming in. Very yin. And then from the center with legs straight, touch the backs of the hands gently together so that fingers point down. And then start to dip the fingers downwards, straightening the arms, coming back into your crouch if that's part of your practice today. Once the arms get to about straight, start to straighten the legs and pull the hands, the arms back up, pulling kind of the action from the elbows so that it's nice and supported from the back. Hands gradually rise to the level of your chin and then turn them open as if you were holding a sphere or a column between your palms. And then repeat by going down, gently pushing that column down through your center line, the center line which is analogous to your spine. Pushing the hands down until we return to the backs of the hands touching the arms straight at the bottom. And as you repeat, continuing with that quality, that imagining of the slow piston up and down, imagine now that you're dipping your hands into the primordial yin at the center of the earth, that quality of energy that is form before form, formlessness really before form, and letting it rise up into your body and flower, coming out the top of the head to rise up and touch into the highest power of the universe, the true yang at the center of all things. And that place at the center then pours back down like a shower of golden light into your crown, through your center, and back down into the yin. So your hands are both describing this column that is yours between your crown and your root, your center channel. And they're also sort of visiting that primordial column between the earth and the sky, between the true yin at the center of the earth and the true yang at the heart of the cosmos, where all things are one. So there's definitely some imagination kind of calisthenics to do. And see if you can go slow enough that your imagination can keep up with your body. So that when you're at the bottom, you're really in the true yin, the depth of the earth. When you're at the top, you're pausing to wait to connect to the true yang before pulling that column of light back down. In this way, you're scrubbing out your center channel, creating clarity and movement and flow, like a tree or a river of life force between earth and heavens, you being their child, an expression of their love, an expression of that natural synergy with which they dance. It echoes the previous form, except for instead of out and in, it's up and down now. But whatever direction there is, if there's a yang, there's a yin. So kind of learning and leaning into that beautiful dance of polarity. But they don't have to contradict. They love each other. They work together well. They're complementary dualists, dualism versus contradictory. Yeah, really nice work. And then from the bottom, we'll transition into our fourth form. So sweeping the arms out to the sides now, they cross in front of your face height. And then the palms turn out to the side. You can come down into your crouch as your hands are out. You're kind of like a mime now in like an invisible box, as if you were holding two walls apart. Soft tuck of your tail, pulling the weight back in your heels can help keep your spine nice and tall and neutral. Breathing expressively. This is a lung form as well as other things. And then turn the pinkies in and then the rest of the fingers in and pull the hands back inwards. Palms facing one another, let them cross in front of your face. And then right hand touches left collarbones, left hand touches right collarbones. To get more specific, let your middle fingers touch the collarbones only. Bow your gaze, your eyes, and your face just looking down, sort of like below the horizon line. Legs are straight. And then repeat, skimming the hands forward and then out, letting them cross in front of your face before they turn outwards, coming down into your crouch. This one name we can call this one is standing between the worlds. And then pull the worlds together. Let them unite in you. Letting the hands cross again in front of you before resting on opposite collarbone. Bowing the head just slightly. So as we expand out, you're moving into virtue, excellence, a really healthy sense of pride, and really embodying that quality of I have a right to be here and take up space. I am responsible for this space. I need to choose to stand in the world. It's another yang expression. And then as you pull yourself back in, you're coming into a yin expression, which is humility. After having taken up that space, taken your action, whatever it was, expressed yourself in a way, coming back to yourself, where you're accountable to yourself in the quiet, in the stillness, in the solitude, humbling yourself to that space to learn, to metabolize, to resource for the next expression. So always traveling this circuit between humility and virtue. Energetically, you can imagine that you're unfurling great wings and also resourcing a sense of boundary. That sphere that is your sphere of influence energetically, when you're on the outwards expression, pushing energy into that, letting the energy that you've cultivated between the earth and the sky flow from body into your boundary. When you come in, you're cultivating through the quiet, through the stillness, through the rest of that humble stance of repose. Both things being necessary for boundaries. If boundaries are only an outwards expression, then they tend to start to become more like shields or even like weapons, so that they're no longer boundaries, but borders or even sort of like attacks. They become sort of antagonistic. So without that humility piece where we're humbling ourselves to the truth of what we felt through our boundaries out in the world, humbling ourselves to the truth of, how do I feel about that boundary now that it's a new moment? We stay in the flow of growth in that way and change, adaptation. Because what was a true boundary yesterday may not be one today or tomorrow. Yeah, beautiful work. Just another reminder, it's not about the specificity with the movements as much as it is the feeling. Does it feel right for you? Your body, your sense of yourself in space will be different than mine. So, tending the essential functions that I'm describing, you can do that with ample wiggle room in terms of what specifically you do physically. And that's good for those of us that feel like we have physical limitations. That's good for those of us with cognitive limitations, potentially, or perceived limitations. It's also just good for different days. Different days, it feels like we got to do different things. Nice. Next time through, we'll transition to our last form of this section. Palms facing in this time and lowering till about they're about chest height, facing in, as if you were hugging a tree. Let your thumbs soften, let your elbows soften. Take a soft bend back into your knees. Another name for this posture is standing at stake. So if you think of when they used to tie people up at stakes, but this is like not like a you've been burned as a witch version. This is more like a I'm the scarecrow, kind of standing at rest in the field, just doing my thing, being one with the landscape, being doing my essential part to ensure a bounteous harvest. You can give a soft tuck to the chin to keep the spine nice and neutral. Just finding a sense of ease and comfort, though there is some effort to hold you here. And really let this one's essential function in this moment be grounding and integrating all that you've just done, movement wise. Letting it come into the body, letting any waste be released and given back to the earth. Letting the chi, the bioenergy that is yours, slowly coalesce into your belly, that space sort of around the bowl of your pelvis, below the belly button. And then over the next few breaths, start to pull your hands in and down, gradually pulling the hands to the belly itself. Rest the palms against the belly here for a moment and really just feel yourself there. And then start to rub in a circle, just welcoming all of that energy that you've cultivated through your movement, letting it come into the body. Letting it rest there in that lower energy center. And we'll transition now towards our meditation. So if you'd like to sit for this, take the time now to find your seat, or if you'd like to lie down, that's also available. I recommend keeping spine upright in some way, given what's available to you, because we do a lot of like up and down in terms of our sense of self relative to the earth and the heavens. So that's just my recommendation. But of course, if you'd like to stay standing, if you need to continue to move around intuitively, or really do anything else as we meditate, meditation does not have to be rigid stillness. You don't even have to think of it as meditation if the M word is triggering for you. You can think of it as intuitive energy exercise, which is really what it is, or energy cultivation. So if that makes sense for you, eyes can close. Breath can continue to move on that rhythmic tidal pulse that you established during your Qigong, or maybe even a little slower. And imagine now that all of the energy you've cultivated through your Qigong practice is now freely available to you to use to cultivate this subtle intuitive sense of your energy internally. And begin by drawing yourself back from wherever your mind might want to be in this moment, past, present, future, and form like a sphere or a ball or maybe even an avatar of self energy in your mind. Breathing in the mind, that space in the center of your skull, between and behind the eyes, this energy heart there of the mind, breathing in a way that lights up the mind's energy and its natural capacity for conception of infinity, for transcendence, for understanding, for experience. And as you bring the mind online, then gently follow gravity down through your throat into your heart center. And let that beautiful sphere of mind goodness come into relationship with your heart center, the space in the middle of your chest. And let mind's wisdom come online then with the wisdom of the heart, the capacity to conceive infinity emotionally, capacity to empathize and to feel, the capacity to balance, to find center. All the other capacities with which the heart is that we don't always have words for. Let the mind and the heart dance and then bring them down even further, following gravity through the solar plexus into the bowl of your pelvis, the space below and behind your belly button, this procreative space. And let the mind wisdom, the heart wisdom there meets the body wisdom. And let the body wisdom bring that natural wisdom and intelligence of being incarnate, being in form, of metabolizing resource and transforming and releasing waste. Let all of those wisdoms come online together. And then open to a new awareness of that center in your pelvis as a natural space, a plot of land. And imagine there that there is a pond or a body of water that resonates with your local sense of things. Even if you're in a place that's not super wet, bring some water to that space. Let this be the water of your life force. And in the center of that body of water, imagine that there is a lily or a lotus, a water floating plant. And imagine that this lotus is here to teach you how to ground your energy. It is an expression of your body's intelligence and innate understanding of how to connect to the earth and receive the resources necessary. And so let your mind, your heart, your body wisdom, your little flowing ball or sphere of self merge with that lily and lotus, and then start to travel down its roots and really surrender the mind's thinking to just experiencing this as an adventure and flowing along that root system down through the water, through all the fish poop and the decaying vegetable matter that makes the pond alive and rich and nourishing, down into the soil below you in your physical space, down through your home, as many layers of home as you need to travel, down through any city or suburb or any human habitation layers that are below you, any sewers or wires or pipes, down into the rich, fertile, living soil itself. Moving deeper now, kind of as if you were just like gliding down this mine shaft. You may feel the earth pressing in on all sides, but far from being claustrophobic, let it be like a hug, an embrace of clay and stone and mineral, perhaps moving through water table, perhaps moving through deposits of shale or flint or natural gas, oil, precious stones, minerals. Moving even deeper now, just trusting gravity and your lily's beautiful intelligence to pull your roots all the way down towards the primordial, the energetic, the spiritual heart of the earth. Knowing that physically the heart of the earth is this core of incredibly dense, heavy mineral. Energetically land there as this deep yin lake with like a liquid silver moonlight quality, quality of fresh water, quality of deep, rich energy, potent oil, quality of nourishing darkness and mysterious starlight, quality of red, rich, oxidized, iron-rich blood, perhaps even green, like chlorophyll-rich plant. However the earth shows itself to you, maybe it's brown like mud or black like the richest soil. Plunge in. Honor that that connection has already been made by your birth in a human body on this planet, and that you are just reminding yourself of it in this moment. And ask your imagination to show you, ask your earth intelligence to show you how you ground here. Does your root plug in like a light socket, or does it just kind of flow in and fan out? Does it connect like something that's part of the earth itself, like an umbilical cord? Or is it more like a well or a spring that just kind of carves out a space for the liquid to flow? any other image or symbol or experience you have of grounding, just let that happen. And if it feels right for you here, you can also make honoring and give gratitude. Small gesture of power and thanks. Thank you, Earth, for our life, for this day, for these bodies, for all the resources that have brought us to this point. And then naturally begin to just notice how that energy is already rising back up through you, rising up into your grounding core, into your root system, gathering momentum as it does and confidence, building strength and resilience and flexibility into your roots as it does. Let it come up into your body, flowing into the pond and spilling out and irrigating all of the physicality that makes you you, all of your interior landscape. Let it come into your bones, into your sinews and tissues, muscles and tendons and joints, rinsing and restoring and rejuvenating. Breathe with that energy as it flows into your energy system and your interior landscape. Let it nourish your organs and each of their unique and mysterious functions. Let it flow out into your skin, its own big sensory organ, and nourish that particular boundary between skin and air with earth energy. Let it rise up through your torso into your heart and nourish the heart's capacity to be a heart. Fanning out across your shoulders, down through your elbows and fingertips, let it rise up into your throat and up into your head and nourish your mind, grounding the system of your mind in earth consciousness, in body presence. And let it bubble up out the crown of your head and spill over you in this great shower, forming a sphere around you of your boundaries, connected below and above to your grounding core, flexible and membranous so that this sphere of your boundaries can be intelligent, grounded in earth intelligence as a way in which your sensory system can sense what it needs and receive nourishment, release waste, and protect you from what you don't need. And take a moment to really feel yourself pulsing in that seed quality of just being nourished in your own physical space, your sphere of influence, your physical body by the earth. Feel that quality of flexibility that this cord can go with you wherever you go, even on an airplane, even out in space potentially. You can always be grounded by choosing to come back to this, by choosing to nourish this over time. And then add to this grounding a quality of receiving from above, a sense of light and warmth. Imagine that your lily is opening its flower brilliantly towards the sun, and that your whole energy system and your whole body now open brilliantly like a flower to the sun, to the sky, to the stars and the heavenly bodies and the cosmic mysteries, to that highest power which pulses at the very height of all things, not as a place of hierarchy, just as a place of origin, and that you're being bathed in that true yang quality of clarity and love and heat and light, creativity and virtue. Let that warm golden radiance bathe your whole energy system from above, showering you with a sense of blessing and protection, a sense of your own divinity and sacredness. And with that really tender, vulnerable, childlike innocence that comes from connection with the true divine, of not knowing what comes next, but knowing that you want to share yourself with the world, even though you may not be guaranteed anything from that expression. And let that warm radiance come down and swirl into your energy body. Let it ignite your boundaries and clarify them, kind of warping and weaving in like the mesh of fabric woven together. These two great intelligences of earth and heavens. Let that warmth flow into your mind and your heart and your belly. And really feel those spaces and energy centers bathed in that quality of goodness and love, connection with all things. And as these energies mix and mingle, the earth below and the sky above energy, the yin and the yang, the silver and the gold, let them alchemize with their own intelligence into the proper harmony and frequency that is yours in this moment. Let them be exactly as they should be, given that they know already how to do that, even if your conscious mind does not understand. Breathe in a way that harmonizes that frequency, that receives that quality of balance. And then let this frequency of energy also just cleanse away anything that doesn't resonate, anything that no longer works relative to this new frequency of groundedness you've created. Let it just slough away. You might see it burning away like dross, or maybe you feel it flowing away like it's just being rinsed or cleansed, or maybe some other metaphor. Let it pour back through your grounding cord down into the earth and just see it blowing up into a million little points of light, or feel it blowing up, or just experience it in some way. To be made new, to be recycled, to be made into something different later. And we'll prepare to shift gears now. So just take a few breaths and come back into that space of your lily, your body presence. And from this space, maybe now it feels appropriate to say hello to the land. Now that you're really grounded and you've chosen to resource yourself, open your heart, rising into the heart, and just open your heart field to the connection of the land around you. Again, those tiniest little garden sprites, the microbes, the fungal nodes, the ants, the insects, to the bigger spirits, the spirits of the place that are maybe megafauna, the birds, the larger plants, the trees, some of whom may be older than you are, and to those larger great spirits that hold your region, just say hello. Just send your love if that feels appropriate. Love being another expression of that infinite energy that you've now tapped and grounded into. Maybe it's the larger ecosystems, even if they're ones that have been altered dramatically by human habitation. Feel the quality in which, like here in the Midwest, the prairie is still here. The forests are still here. The wetlands are still here. Even the oceans and the glaciers that disappeared millions of years ago but were here once, they're still here. Just say hello to all the beings and energies that tend your region and feel that connection nourishing your energy body, inviting you into relationship. And notice how that is also part of your grounding, to be here with others. But then rather than getting lost in that, come back to your own heart. Come back to your grounding cord, your axis, and take a few breaths to transition now. Maybe open eyes if that makes sense to you. Maybe pat yourself down. Maybe get some wiggles out. We'll transition into a conversational space based on what we just experienced, and we'll kind of talk about it and contextualize it. So take a few breaths, tune in. If you're joining us non-locally, this is, or asynchronously, it's not gonna maybe make as much sense. But if you feel called, notice if there's anything you want to share about the experience and bring that forward, whether that's something that you really liked, something that felt challenging. Yeah, anything that feels like it wants to be named in this moment. And no pressure, right? And again, if you'd like it to be off the recording, then you can just tell me that and I'll pause the recording.
I was definitely feeling some resistance to becoming present because everything is just always shifting in the world, you know. I keep this longing for stability and I get these glimpses and tastes of it, and then I become like a hoarder. And resistance to the inevitability of the flow and the changing and the shifting. And so as each of those, like, intrusive thought is not the right word, but it's the first word that comes to mind, would come through, the worries would break through. I just did a kind of inner symbol of acceptance. Oh, I accept you are a worry. Thank you. And then they would slip away a bit. And then when the accessing of the land came to be, I was really thankful that you said, okay, come back. Because it just is such a place where I can really, really not get the intrusive thoughts, is in the nature. And so just even kind of energetically being there for a moment, I was leaning in quite hard and glad to come back to presence.
Totally. Thanks so much for sharing that, Nettie. And there's some really good pieces in that that I'll speak to here in a bit that are really good segues into some of our work today.
I really appreciated the connection, the sense of connecting to the earth and the sky. I mean, I've certainly done groundings, but that was a lot more it just, the detail and the length of time that we took was good, because it just feels like, the world is so crazy and moving in such difficult directions that it was, it's just, I think, so important to connect to what's real and true in the earth and the sky. And I've had times where I really felt a connection, and a lot of times it feels more wishful than real. And it was good that we spent some time there.
Thanks so much for sharing that.
I also am
Both.
frequently thankful for the length of groundings that your practice encourages or makes space for. And it's really changed the way that I practice grounding with myself, and really just allowing some deep, open, imaginative space to come through and to be just in that for as long as I want.
Totally. Well, and I meant to actually mention too, like Nettie, folks like you who have been through energy body mastery, you're like, oh, this is review. But there's something so interesting about coming back to the basics after you metabolize the whole course and then practice with it for, several months, or for some folks that may join us several years, where it's just like, oh, wow, what's different now about how I can come to the grounding? Um, yeah, thanks so much. Beautiful shares, because they both are kind of pointing me towards, I think, what really wants to come forward relative to this. Given that we are a group, the audience joining us is folks that have both done these practices at length formally and learned part of the whole system, and then folks that are just experiencing them maybe for the first time, maybe with other grounding vocabularies or energy vocabularies, or even no energy vocabulary, which is also great. All of that, you're all welcome for sure. And wherever you are is great. And what I want to share first, so in terms of the technical logistics, so these practices sit within a larger body of practice, that also sit within a larger body of practice, kind of like Russian nesting dolls. But the essence of this way of working with energy from within the perspective of these teachings is that our practice creates our energy body, or really, however you want to put it, your actions create your energy body. So actions we take in the world, actions we take day to day, thoughts, how we act on our feelings, how we actually do things with our energy, that all shape the energy body that we have and that we find. So often what we get in the contemporary culture, we get a lot of very experiential exposure right now to things like grounding, whether that's something spontaneous, like I was just out in a beautiful place and I had that incredible, beautiful, rich experience of just being really grounded, present. All the thoughts fell away. I felt the earth holding me, loving me. Oh, those love of the earth moments or love of the universe moments. Those happen spontaneously through life, and I think they're really important. And there's something to honor. You can also experience those like on plant medicines or in different altered states, ecstatic dance, and all of that's really groovy and good, or movement practices. Um, this practice is about taking that reality and making it more consistent for us day to day through our daily practice. And for some of us, the commitment to a daily practice is pretty out of reach. So through our regular practice might be a better word. But that's part of the perspective that I think makes these teachings unique. My first experiences of grounding were we ground when we're going to do a big ritual. And maybe other than that, you ground when you're really tired to get energy. Like I remember bartending in New York when I was a young witch, and be like, oh God, I have to be here till 3 a.m. and it's 3 p.m. And I've already had a full day and now I have 12 more hours. And then I'm grounding, I'm receiving all this energy from the earth. But it was a little ungrounded of a way to ground. It was a little manic. And so part of grounding is not just being grounded in the moment, but being grounded rhythmically throughout life via your practice. So doing things consistently that ground you and noticing the things that unground you that are avoidable, because some of them are not, right? Like if you have to fly across the country to visit your family and air travel really ungrounds you, as it does most of us, I think, or many of us, that's not a choice. You know, you can't just like never take a plane again. I mean, you could. I like to take Amtrak, but Amtrak from coast to coast is like 5 days. So that's really intense. That's ungrounding in a different way. So I digress. So there's certain things in life that are ungrounding, that our grounding practice, when we tend to it over time, can help us to show up to better and recover from quicker, to the degree that, last time I took a plane, really not that big of a deal. It's not my favorite thing, but it's not like I was like, oh my God, I'm totally, no, I'm just like on the plane for sure. So, and really tending my grounding cord as we're taking off, as we're landing, like, okay, body, we're here now. Um, so these are more the things that have the quality of habit or pattern or potentially addiction. Like on my phone late at night, staring into a blue screen every night right before bed, super ungrounding for me. Something that over time I worked with my grounding practice to stop doing, because I recognized not only did it make my grounding meditation harder in the morning, um, but it suddenly it became more and more clear that I was doing, it's like it's almost like the two wolves metaphor. There's these two energies competing within me. One wants to stay up all night, and use stimulants to stay up all night. And the other is like, no, you could just ground and have like robust energy throughout the day and then go to sleep at night and rest. So it's kind of grounding both ways, right? It's grounding in the moment and grounding as a lifestyle. And you all, I'm sure, can think of any number of things that you are recognizing already, like, oh, these are really ungrounding. And some of them are really unique to the moment, like just like, okay, I just can't go out tonight with these friends, even if they're my best friends, because I just don't feel I don't have it in me. I don't have the resources. I don't have the yin cultivation, to put it in one language, to really, go out and do that, to be in the world and express, which is part of what the Qigong really brings us to, is that feeling of, oh, this is what expression feels like. This is what contraction feels like. Um, and some of them are just day to day. We start to shift away from certain things. Some of them are very seasonal. So to land us in the season we're in, we're moving towards the yin time. And man, it's so tricky. Like I just had a bunch of people over on Friday night. We have family gathering on Thursday for the holiday. I feel like every weekend now I'm getting invitations, where for 6 months it was kind of crickets. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, it's so interesting that as we move towards the winter solstice in the northern hemisphere, which is meant to be that deep yin still point of the year, where we're called inward, we all start going kind of manic, and we turn on all the Christmas lights and we start going out. We eat all the sugar and we eat all the junk food and we all want to be together and da 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 da. But there is a quality of grounding that can come from socializing too. So it's a really tricky balance to navigate at this time. It's also a time where, as it gets really cold here in the Midwest, people tend to isolate. And then when you put that in context to the actual, maybe larger, I think it's a season, but it's not like fall. It's like the historical season we're moving through, with great shifts and, mass uprisings and big horrible tragedies and violence and all of this stuff that's going down all over the world right now. Gaza being one point, flashpoint in a world that's, there are many other flashpoints that aren't getting the same quality of attention, even here in the United States. So when that starts to happen too, sometimes the naturally kind of grounding quality of winter, the naturally kind of solitude-inducing quality of winter, starts to become really isolating. And then if we don't have grounding, then it just feels really disconnecting. or maybe even smothering. Like, I don't want to go out there. I don't, it's freaking scary out there. And I don't know, I'll go to this party. I don't know which of these people are going to have the same opinions as I have about these certain things, or if they're going to acknowledge it, or if they're not going to acknowledge it, or, we start to just form into this little kind of like, mole hole, but not a healthy mole hole, because I think the moles are actually really healthy. So, so all of that is for me more reasons why grounding as a regular practice is really key. It's key in summer, but it's definitely key at this time of winter because it helps us to be in the body, to negotiate more truthfully and honestly with our resources, and to actually be in spaces and in experiences and just be walking through the rhythms of the day and life. Because you may not leave the house, but you may still feel an incredible collective sense of what's going on. You may not even engage with social media, and you may still feel an incredible sense of what's going on. You may just feel bowled over by grief in a certain day. And grounding is about having the stability to be with whatever that is. Grounding does not make us invulnerable or impenetrable or rigid. When we're talking about the idea of the longing for stability, oftentimes we feel those longings rooted in childhoods that were really unstable. That was definitely my experience. And I think most of us, even if you never moved or whatever, there's this way in which when we're separate from the earth, even the most rigid of structures, it's like we separate as much as we can. We start to build even more rigid and rigid structures, and yet they don't seem to bring stability. They seem to bring less stability, which I think is part of what we're seeing historically right now. These really rigid social, religious, political, economic structures that have been created by basically very ungrounded people, by this sense of top down, we're putting this on top of the earth instead of letting it grow up from the earth. Those are being shaken out. They're being destroyed by the earth, you know, by by currents of ground up movement of people being like, we can't live like this anymore. You're telling me that the economy is booming, but I'm down here starving. That's kind of sometimes how we feel when we ground, because the mind is like, la da da, I have my mind stories, whatever those are. And the body's like, here's the story. Here's the true story. And we really want to bring them together, right? And the heart wants to mediate between them. And for me, sometimes it's like the mind is in the stress story and the body's actually like, I'm safe. You're in your house. Nothing's going on. There's no wolves at the door. Why are you freaking out? You know? And for some of us, it's actually like we've been very dissociated mentally. We've been plastering happiness over things. I don't think that's most people on this call, but it's possible. And then we drop into the body, and the body's like, hello, here's a legion of unhealed things. And I actually am holding all this stress from what you did yesterday. You weren't tending to, da 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 da, for so, either place that you come to it is whatever. It's all available. And it may shift from day to day. But landing that back in. So as you practice, you can bring these practices into your life, rhythmically, put them, for me, it's really key to do it right when I wake up, with a certain sense of formality. But that doesn't mean that I get to do the full Qigong form and the full meditation every day. Um, Maybe it's 5 minutes of Qigong, 10 minutes of meditation, and then I got to run out and do something else. Some days when I have a lot of space, wow, I love to just expand into it for an hour. That's my dream. That's my ideal. And when I was like single and didn't have as many professional responsibilities, and I was pretty freaking lonely, but man, I practiced so long every single day. It was so luxurious as to almost be indulgent. So, you kind of have to find it relative to your life. But one thing I would encourage then is to play with both the video of the Qigong and the video of the meditation, and take those home with you and walk them, as a friend of mine says, walk them through your life, like walk these practices and see how they work. Now, for some of us, morning's not your bag, and it might be, I get up, I do all my stuff, I like struggle to get awake, and then coffee kind of is my lifeline out of it or whatever. And then around lunchtime, then I feel good for practice. That's totally, if that's your normal, great, go with it. Don't shame it just because some of us are morning people, some of us are not. If you're more of a night person, do your practices at night, do them before bed, Like, and you might be like, I would like to do it morning, noon, and night. If you're have the space, great, you know. It's like woohoo, go nuts. So practice is meant to be a flexible enough framework that it can hold you and meet you where you are day to day. What's important is that it tends the essential function inside. So the form of the practice may be really, really blurry and stretchy, given your context and the needs of the moment. You know, if I'm traveling, my practices look really different than when I'm at home, etc. When I'm teaching like long-term classes, or if I'm teaching in general, my practice looks different than when I'm like, wow, I have the day off. What am I going to do? You know, it's like a different quality of practice. So the function of grounding in this context is twofold. We're establishing that connection, but we're also cultivating the energy body based on the connection. So the qigong is more about the cultivation. It's kind of like you're a little battery and you're pulsing up and down, and you actually create qi, which then you route into your dantian. And if you really want to go further with that, you kind of need to find like a more of advanced qigong practice than just these quickie forms. But you can take the quickie forms are meant to be a taste of that, and there's a lot of that online. There's a lot of that in person that you can find potentially. But then with that chi, we let that chi fuel our imaginal sense then of the interior. And I should clarify that a lot of my language is very visual. I'm a very visual person, but you might find that you're not visual at all with your symbolic sensing. And that may be because of your ability physically or not. And so you may be a very tactile person in your life, but then your language internally is very visual, and that's kind of odd, right? Or you may be a very visual person like I am in life, and your symbolic language is more tactile. You might sense in terms of smells, taste. It might be colors, it might be textures, it might be some kind of swimmy synesthetic soup of different sensations that really don't have a name. You know, you really couldn't describe it, or you might struggle to describe it with language. So please open space for your imagination to show you how energy expresses to you. And don't get caught up just because I'm limited by my own experience with visual language. Or metaphorical language, right? Because yours might be, I've worked, you know, or worked with or been in space with students that are like, yeah, it's all music, it's all pop songs. And it's like, I know I'm grounded because I hear this like Beyonce song. And like, you're just like, but if it tends and rings true to that essential function, great. It doesn't have to be like anyone else's symbolic language, is what we call it. So using the energy to fuel that imaginal meditative space where then I'm cultivating my energy body through that and letting that shift things internally over time. Eventually you may find that your lily is more like a cypress tree because that's who you are. That's like the forest you were raised in or something like that. For me right now, my sacral center is sort of lightly wooded. It's like Missouri. You know what I mean? It's like it's not primordial ancient like big huge crazy pine trees. That's more like my heart. It's more just like meadow, creek, brush, forest, you know, that kind of thing. Like boundary forest. And that's just what it is. So that kind of brings me to the piece. Well, let me finish this thought before I go on. So cultivating that interior sense through time, letting your grounding clarify things internally. Now you might find that you're more like, you know, I'm in my energy body and it's just like the shape of my body, but it's just like energy and it's not like big landscapes or something like that. You might find some other complete aesthetic schema there. So just again, let your symbolic language show you over time what happens as you ground, not just today, not just out in nature in those beautiful moments or on your plant medicines, but in your life as you consistently practice grounding, what changes in terms of your energy body and your sense of your energy? Because that is the other piece. That longing for stability we have is often in some form of resistance to the flow and the change around us, like you were sharing, Neti. And that there's a different quality of stability that the earth holds. The earth is always changing. The seasons are one really visible evidence of that. But really, if you find a spot, like if you visit the same spot on land day to day, you're going to experience really different stuff all the time. Whether there's humans interacting there or animals, right? There's just this quality of steady, measured change that the earth tends for us as an energy. So that's one piece that we receive medicinally and sort of functionally from grounding is we're not stagnant, we're not rigid, we're actually quite flexible and responsive and adaptive in the moment. And so if you find yourself reaching for a grounding that's really rigid, then you might step back from that a bit and come back to the earth and let the earth kind of guide you back to that. Oh, this is what grounding feels like. Because for me, like I'm a teacher of this stuff, right? And I trained for many years to do it. And I had like supervision and I had a lot of, like guidance and no, that don't do that, do that, do that. It's like I went through a many year long training program. And to some degree, I'm still in it. And so I have a professional ego around it. So when I ground, there are days where I really get caught up in the right way. And then I have to always remind myself there is no right way. The right way is the way that works today. So just one thing to throw out there, it's like whatever it is, you might not have a professional development around it. You might have more of like oh, I don't know because I'm just a student or something, like we all tend to have our own baggage that comes up. Practice is one of those things that brings stuff up for us. That's why it's not the most popular thing in the world. And so you might welcome those things as they arise through your practice as the gift they are. Because really we're looking to be in that honest relationship with steady measured change so that we can move through the seasons as an earth being, as a participant, not creating excess waste, not exploiting more resources than we need because we're trying to do too much and then we constantly burn out, you know what I mean? Just being a harmonious participant. You can also move your grounding as you work with it day to day, and we'll talk about this more at the end of class, into actual new actions, right? So not just now, it's not necessarily just the actions that make me feel more grounded or make me feel less grounded that I'm avoiding, but I'm actually sort of like grounding my life. Like, does this job feel grounded? Does this feel like it feeds and nourishes my system? Do my Are my resources flowing? Do I have an avoidant relationship with my bank account or with the things in my closet, right? Are my closets overflowing with junk? Do I have an avoidant relationship with my body? Grounding is meant to open us to that whole terrestrial field of life and help us to move that through steadied, measured change as well, so that there's more flow there. Um, and again, just pause or just stop me if you have questions, comments, shares, just unmute yourself and speak. And so you may find that eventually, as you cultivate your energy through these practices, um, it feeds into other process work that you do. It makes you rest more. It makes you play more. These are all things that it makes you actually realize, oh, I love practicing, right? And I'm gonna just learn and lean into how to hack that in my life, and play with it until it's like something that I'm like, okay, cool. It's not perfect. It doesn't look like everyone else's practice, but it is my practice. I think we all have an opportunity to find that, whether we consider ourselves practice people or not. Sometimes, especially if we don't. So before I had any practice, right, I was a pretty intense drug addict and alcoholic. And now in hindsight, I can look back at that time and be like, there was the longing for practice there because addictions are really boring and repetitive. I was like, and like I had alcohol in the freezer, I had alcohol in the purse, I had alcohol, you know what I mean? It's like I was very prepared to be drunk whenever, wherever, whenever, at all times. I knew all the bartenders who could give me free drinks, etc. So I was adding a lot of energy, expending a lot of energy on getting drunk and altering my state in that way on these addictions, right? But in other ways, my life was completely chaotic. And so when I started doing yoga, I remember just thinking, like, I'm not like these people. These people are beautiful, athletic. You know, I wrote all kinds of stories about who they were, disciplined, regular, steady people. And it took me many years to recognize as I slowly rerouted energy out of addictions and into holistic practices like yoga and meditation and you know that occasioned many other healing things in my life. But it took me a really long time to realize, oh, we're all practicing. We just don't all know it, and we're not all practicing things that we really want to be practicing. So one of my teachers used to say, what we repeat, we improve. What we practice, we get good at. And so she was like, so what are you practicing? Are you practicing freaking yourself out when you see that someone hasn't responded to your text and then you see the bubbles appear and that it, you know what I mean? It's just like are you practicing getting drunk? Are you practicing, you know, negative self-talk? Or are you practicing like Nettie beautifully brought forward as an example, stepping back from the mind chatter into the grounding or accepting, you know what I mean? It's like it's just a funny thing where it's like I think as humans we basically just have one way to be, and that's just us being, just us manifesting. And we tend to valence certain things. Practices are good, addictions are bad. You know what I mean? But basically it's the same energy. Your repetition creates your energy body. And from the perspective of these teachings, your energy body as an expression of your choices also then scaffolds new choices and makes new choices available to you. So there's kind of this complementary, this paradox to it. It's like my energy body is created by my choices, and my choices are also guided by my energy body. And you might find that as you shape your energy body through grounding, just grounding practice alone regularly over time, things around you change that you didn't even plan on changing, because that's kind of the prismatic nature of who we are as manifestors. Earth energy is always being fed up into us, and we're always manifesting something through that. And it doesn't always follow an easy to follow train of causality, like, oh, I received the hunch, and then I drew this picture, and then I sold it on Etsy for $50. You know, sometimes it's like, I just shifted to this certain degree, and now, you know, I don't know, I'm just getting the hunch that I want to go to this store instead of that store. I want to shop at the farmer's market instead of this. And I ran into these people, and then da, 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 you know, it's just like these weird chain of events can happen that completely transform your life, um, all through grounding, you know, all through shaping your energy. So just something to hold open. That's kind of the point, right? Because we want to transform our capacity to be harmonious co-creators in the world. And that doesn't always look in the same way for everyone, certainly. It doesn't always look the way we expect it to. So also just quickly know that this is also a cleansing tool. So if you're feeling like a little gunky, good for that. Picking up stuff from other people, good for that. Um, where I want to lead us before we take our little break is this is also about emotional presence too. And so as we restore flow energetically, it tends to restore flow for all things. And the emotions kind of operate on their own frequency that for me elementally is a little more like water. So in the same sense that grounding and tending your energy in our cosmology of these teachings, the cycle teachings, is your responsibility as a human adult, not as a child. So if you're like, oh, no one taught me, you know, it's yeah, totally. But now that you're an adult, it's your responsibility. You're not responsible for things you don't know. Your true ignorance, you're not responsible for it. Once you start to learn things, you're responsible for them. So that's just tricky thing about adulthood, right? Don't we love that? So we're responsible for our energy, we're responsible for our emotions. Emotions are energy. In this system, everything is energy. Energy gives us access to everything: body, mind, heart, spirit, emotions. So your emotions want to flow. Oftentimes, particularly those of us that are quite sensitive, quite empathic, quite intuitive, or and or those of us who our sensitivities have been turned up really loud from trauma or just certain experiences we've had in life. Maybe they don't register as trauma per se with a capital T, but something that was too much, too soon, too fast, etc. Something that pushed us out of our authenticity, pushed us out of our healthy range as children or even as adults. They can turn up our sensitivity. So those of us that feel really sensitive emotionally, whether it's just our own emotions or we feel really sensitive to other people's emotions, etc., um, the emotions tend to express with a lot of intensity, a lot of turbulence, or they tend to stay around for a really long time. If I'm happy, that's like a 6 week manic phase, and that burns me back down into depression. And then I'm depressed for 6 weeks, that kind of thing. That was a big period that I went through myself for many years. So grounding tends to help us restore some stability and flow there as well. So one piece is that as we undergird the energetic system with that sense of steady, measured yin yang rise and fall that comes from doing a regular qigong and grounding practice, then everything else starts to want to flow with that. The side effect that is a healthy side effect is that we will notice the things that are not flowing with that all the more visibly. And so when we get triggered, amped up, really in a tizzy about something, or really emotionally indulgent about something or avoidant, then that will start to take up even more space because we've been restoring that sense of natural ebb and flow. And then suddenly this aberration comes up where it's just like, oh my God, that person looked at me funny in the grocery store and I have not been able to stop raging ever since. What the fuck? You know what I mean? Whereas maybe 6 years ago, 16 years ago, whatever, or 6 months ago, I maybe wouldn't have noticed that I was raging because the whole thing was just, on that level. So a few things to know about grounding and the emotions. One piece, and this is from my experience, blurred with a few other teachings from both the cycle teachings, and I'll give a lot of credit to another author and teacher who I've just read her books and really gotten a lot out of them. Her name's Carla McLaren, and she has a book called The Language of Emotions. That's an exquisite, she has a whole teaching, a whole body of teachings around emotions as an energy and working with them. And I really recommend that work as a complement to pretty much any other system. But so emotions are a tricky thing because um, mine and not mine, really tricky with emotions. Because if you're in a room with a crying person, it's really hard not to feel something. Emotions like water. Water's an excellent metaphor and teacher around emotions because we share water. My blood was once your spit, semen, etc. You know what I mean? Like water, that's how, and the river and the acid rain and the cerebral spinal fluid and all the other and urine and whatever else. You know what I mean? That's how water works. Water flows through many different forms. It's an exquisite teacher elementally of shapeshifting, of taking different forms. And so water,
Dropbox.
emotion, emotions like water um, tend to not respect the boundaries we want them to. And that's just one of those funny realities of being a human. It's kind of like sound. Sound, you know what I mean? Like it just vibrates. No matter how well you soundproof a situation, there's going to be some vibration that gets through. Emotions tend to be the same thing. So even people that don't read the news will be like, why am I so freaking depressed today? You know what I mean? I usually read my news at a very specific time through like a couple lists every day, and then that's my news for the day. That's it. I don't engage with it otherwise. Um, and so I'll be like, damn, today feels fucking crazy. And this has happened a lot in my life. And then I will look at the news and it'll be like, oh, there was a huge, like a mass shooting or something like that. And it's like, of course I was feeling the craziness, you know? It happens to me all the time. So it's often as evidence of like how out of relationship with my emotions I can be. Because I'm like, why do I feel so crazy? It must be something wrong with me. And it's like, oh no, there's just a collective field moving through, I get a lot of astrology alerts because I practice as an astrologer too. And so I'll be like, oh, okay, we're all feeling crazy. That person was giving me a dirty look at the grocery store, and I was taking it personal because of the same larger collective emotional current that we're all just kind of caught up in. But that being said, we don't want to use the collective nature of emotions to make excuses for not taking responsibility. Because once it's in my body, it's my blood and it's mine to be responsible for. Once the emotion is in my field, it's now mine to be responsible for. Grounding, too, as a cleansing practice, tends to also release things that aren't mine truly. It's like literally like an emotional contagion, and then leave me with the stuff that is mine, which can still be incredibly unwieldy and just like, whoa, way too big. So, a core teaching about emotions that I find really important is that all emotions are energy and they all have a function. They all want to go somewhere and do something, and that they're necessary for the functioning of an organism. So it's not just like, we would all be great if not for these pesky emotions. It's without these pesky emotions, we truly wouldn't be human and we wouldn't be able to orient in life and do the things that we really need to be doing day to day with the same depth and presence and honesty. Because emotions can bring us in things that the sensory system doesn't, that the mind certainly doesn't. Emotions can bring us to that territory that's more imaginal, intuitive, spiritual, without which we don't have access to part of that essential humanness of being a heart, of sitting next to that person and feeling empathy when they're crying. Um, Even if the thing they're crying about doesn't make logical sense to our individual brain, there's some depth that it comes from emotional reality. This, I think about this all the time in regards to the world, because people are not waging wars and perpetrating genocides based on logic. Do you know what I mean? People are not denying trans people their humanity based on logic. It is deeply emotional to deny someone their humanity. It is a deeply emotional experience to feel so afraid that you have to deny someone their humanity in whatever way you do it, whether that's a big collective expression of violence or just an everyday thing. So if we don't really have the emotions online, we're missing a lot of the motivators of what's really been shaping history for all of human history. So they're pretty, I find them pretty important. I try to honor them. I'm still in process with that, but I really consider them sacred. Um, and I'll talk a little as we dip into grief about like some experiences in my life where they really have shown me the sacredness that they hold. So given that they're energy and that they all have a function, they all want to go somewhere. So really briefly, the core practice around this relative to grounding is feeling in then with your resourcing from the earth and the sky. This is your larger container. So if you're not resourced in that way, you feel cut off and disconnected, a wave on your ocean can feel like a tsunami. If you resource, you might find that you have the spaciousness and the bigness to actually hold that wave and be with it for what it is. So that's one piece of why grounding is really helpful with the emotions. It's just that sense of scale. The earth is like, yeah, I feel that with you, but like I'm the earth. I'm like, what, 6 billion years old or 9 billion years old? Like, totally. And I'm really big. Like you can't even conceive of how big I am relative to your tiny body. So I feel that intensity with you of that emotion. And here, let me contextualize with you that for you. Not in a way that's like, you're an idiot. How could you feel that way? Or you're so small, you're insignificant, but just in a way that's like scale, scale is real for sure. Gives us a context to hold it. But the emotion itself also wants to do something. And that doesn't always translate to an action. So let's start with it as energy. So the key practice is to reestablish your sense of scale and context, ground yourself in your body, in the emotion, but also connected and resourced from the planet, And then to be with the emotion and ask it what it needs, what it wants, where is it trying to go? Let it reveal itself to you as an energy or as a symbol or as an element, and then follow that logic and let it take you where it needs to go. So if it's watery, water tends to go down until it finds ground, until it finds like the bottom, right? So if you pour water on your head, eventually it's going to drip down to your feet. So water wants to flow downwards. Now, because in our culture, we're really uncomfortable with the garden variety sadness, to say nothing of sorrow, grief, loss, all of those things, then the things that are, and we're also just really uncomfortable with the body, right? We're really ungrounded culture. So the function essentially from this model of sadness tends to be grounding. And Carla says really cool things about how sadness is actually two key functions. It's about us letting go of things that aren't ours and us coming back to ourselves, coming back to ground when we've overextended ourselves. So instead of, oh my God, I'm sad, I went to a party and now I'm sad, I'm hungover. Oh my God, I shouldn't have had all that sugar. And, it's like, oh, the sadness is helping me back to myself. It's helping me recognize that I need a quiet day or a quiet hour because I was at a party talking all night. You know, it could be as simple as a 5 second, 5 minute. Oh, it just wants me to do my grounding for 5 extra minutes today. And then the water of the sadness flows down into your system and irrigates your lower chakras or whatever. And then you're good. You know what I mean? Where the emotions are all become problematic is when we don't let them do what they want to do. So the only other one that I want to, happiness is kind of the opposite. It wants to kind of express outwards. It wants to kind of uplift us. And it can also become really turbulent and manic when we live in that space or when we make it out to be better than sadness or we seek it constantly like a drug, because it needs to be grounded. And if it's not grounded, then it maybe not isn't a true thing. And it might just be some holdover, something that you haven't let yourself feel. For me, feeling happiness is also really vulnerable too. Um, Briefly, anger wants to reinforce our boundaries. Anger for me and for a lot of us tends to be more fiery. You can move no matter how big or crazy your rage is, you can move it into your boundaries and really light up your boundaries and get them as strong as you want them to. Anger also wants us to take action often. So once my boundaries are restored, especially if anger is coming because my boundaries have been crossed, then I'm needing to take an action. And so anger is also motivating action. So if you feel like you're reading the news every day and you are boiling with rage, but your boundaries haven't been crossed truly, physically, you might need to go out on the picket line or find some creative, honest action or expression of that anger as an energy in your life. That might be the message of the anger. So then grief is this deeper, more mysterious, much more collective quality of, it's kind of like a deeper sadness. There's no way to feel grief without coming into a sense of the collective. There is no loss that is just a personal loss. And that's, I think, one key reason why we avoid the hell out of grief in our culture, because when you grieve, it is collective. When a child is lost, it's a loss for all of us. And when a childhood is ruined because of a law or you know what I mean, or a trauma, it's a loss for all of us. And so when you multiply that by thousands of children, millions, billions, it's a huge loss. And it's a staggering quality of grief. But here's the thing, not all that grief is yours. So if you truly follow the grief and let it take you where it wants to go, it takes you down to those larger, elemental, more primordial places where then you can just let your grief flow out with the bigger system, with the larger waters underneath us, with the earth, with the sky. Let them hold you. It restores access to that place where we truly feel that we are connected, but we have to let it do its job. If we don't let it do its job, usually I think what I'm seeing a lot right now, especially relative to Gaza, is a lot of I'm grieving, and then I kind of choke, and then I put it on Instagram, and then it becomes something else. And then we're all kind of talking about it, and I'm getting likes for it, and then I'm writing a story, or unless, if you're not a social media person, I'm grieving, I'm feeling the grief. Oh my God, I'm feeling the loss. And now I'm in my head about it. And I'm talking about what it is, and I'm judging the people that are doing the thing, and I'm judging the systemic factors, and I'm thinking about how we should just fucking fix this and da 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 da. I'm not actually feeling the grief, because when we just feel the grief, it will crack you open. And you do have to make space for grief in a way that you don't necessarily have to make space for garden variety sadness. But when you do, it tends to do its own thing and just move on. And it's just one of those things. Like now that I have a very grief, oh, how do I put it? A grief oriented, I grieve a lot. I'm grieving all the time. I'd say grieving most days. Um, and now that I have a more grief oriented practice and lifestyle, I make space for it. I grieve a ton, and then I'm done. And then and then and it also is partially puts me in a frame where, like, if I'm grieving at lunch, I might pause. I might make some extra space during the day. Certainly there have been moments where I have a complete meltdown. And then, because I've been honest enough and my grief has been held, ideally it's held collectively, right? But we don't always have the human privilege to do that with other humans. So that's where the land comes in. And that's where the elements and the earth come in. And sometimes it's just like my partner's not here and it's just the two of us. So I'm just grieving. The dog is kind of like, yeah, he's helpful, but it's not like he's like the most space holdy. He's a dog. So I'm grieving, I'm grieving, I'm grieving. And I invite my ancestral helping spirits in. I invite the helping spirits to hold me in that. If it's a big crack, because otherwise it may not complete itself. And so the other piece that the grief wants to restore for us, it restores access to humanity as a collective experience, and it restores access to what we personally value the most. So my heartbreak, my grief around, and it's day to day with certain things that are happening in, say, Gaza or Sudan or United States, again, the east side of Kansas City. It shifts from day to day, but it's personal to me. And that's, I think, the other piece that we tend to avoid the most about grief, because it shows you what you value. And that's fucking scary. And so when I really grieve and accept that, for me, the sanctity of childhood and the protection of children is like one of the most important things that I could even conceptualize, that's a really scary place to be. It's an incredibly vulnerable place to be in a culture that is killing children wholesale. You know what I mean? That sucks. That has reoriented, that has rerouted my life. I thought I wanted to be a famous drag queen, DJ. Um, and truly being honest with my energy, my emotions, year after year, day after day in my practice, was like, drag is not going to cut it for me in terms of making a difference in the lives of children. And some drag queens are, and it's not that it's not really about drag. It's about what's personal to me. Because really, performance, like, I don't have the body that wants to be on stage all the time. That shit was destroying me. Like, it's just high heels, so exhausting. So grieving my grief, and that included unprocessed grief from my childhood and still does, and just letting grief flow around all the other things that was truly flowing, and really moving that into my process and clearing the things that I needed to clear and getting the healings that showed me, etc., were necessary. But all of that rerouted me towards this life that I live now, which is like a full-time teacher, that was, and someone who works with children off and on, and someone who's in relationship with my sibling and my in-laws and their children. So that was a big redirect from like crazy drug addicted sex worker, right? And it didn't happen overnight, but so it just want something to kind of show from my personal experience how grief. I remember when one of my best friends died of an accidental overdose. This was 10 years ago. Yeah, it was 2013. That completely It was the year that I did my first teacher training. And it literally thrust me so hard into my practice because there was nowhere else where I felt held in that grief, but my yoga. And that thrust me. I did so much damn yoga that the teachers there were like, you should just do this teacher training, even if you don't want to teach, because you just love this. You're here every single day, you know? And that took me off onto this crazy journey that I've been on, you know? So I don't know that losing that friend, if I hadn't have lost him in that same way, I don't know that I would be here in the same way. And that's one of the big mysteries. It's part of the thing with grief, right? It's like you get down into that place that for me, it's kind of like this primordial river. It's like the river, like the river that is the mother of all rivers, something like that, or the ocean, you know, sometimes when you get down to that place, you realize, wow, we're all going back there. That's fucking scary. All the people I love are going there. I'm going there. Ideally, we don't do it too far apart time-wise, but still it's going to be fucking painful and also really inconveniencing and humiliating. You know, we're all going to become incontinent at some point. It's just, you know, so that's my mind. But the grief really brings us to that mystery of why we're here. So underneath all of that, still the grounding, the earth, that connection with that larger container. And my capacity to hold and move grief increases daily by my willingness to show up for my practice. Because the practice is not only the clarification of this channel, which is my personal channel. I'm gesturing between my crown and my root, my tip of my tailbone and the top of my head, but also so my capacity for that to be a channel through which things move instead of get blocked, but also my capacity to be held by that larger channel, that larger context of the earth below, the sky above. When that isn't just an experience that I have once in a while, but an experience that I cultivate, especially on the days I don't really want to, or I'm not super feeling it through discipline, that increases my capacity over time, which doesn't mean that I have to be this grief superhero, like everyone give me your grief. You know, that's kind of this like out of, it's not quite in a spiritual adult way that a lot of these kind of new age empathy people, I think, kind of experience emotions. It's like they're throwing themselves into other emotions. It creates a lot of churn. The intensity on the surface doesn't necessarily mean truth. So truth comes from being with the emotion as it is, staying with it rather than letting it completely submerge me or keeping it at this like, you know, super dissociated distance and then following it where it needs to go as an energy. So let's take a little break. Any questions or shares thus far in terms of what's coming up for y'all around that stuff? And it's okay if not. And I should say, people joining on the recording, if you have really burning questions or even not burning questions, just email them to me and after the fact, because maybe they'll, you know, be the seeds of new classes. So don't feel shy around your questions or your shares too. Because sometimes just a share that's just like, this seems kind of personal, but I just want to share it, can also seed, you know, really interesting material for the rest of the class too, or for new classes. So then from here, if there are no questions, we are going to take a 5-minute comfort break. So let's come back at like 2:07. And if you don't need it, you don't have to. And then we'll come back and do more movement, and then we'll actually make some space for grief and emotions and other stuff. Okay, cool. So see you all in 5 minutes. I'm gonna start back up. Okay, welcome back. So we'll just chat a little bit more and then we'll dive back into some movement and some more kind of meditative work, and then we'll close. It's crazy how time flies. Hopefully for you, it has flown. It's flown for me. Okay, so coming back to the connection between grief and what we truly value. for me in my life, that has continued to drop me deeper and deeper into this kind of essential experience of what is mine to do here, which for me, I'll call in our language of these teachings like the dream that is mine, my dream, the vision for my life. And we use vision not to limit it to vision as something that you see with physical eyes, but vision coming back to that symbolic imaginal quality of intuition, of felt sense, of taste, smells, all the ways in which you receive the non-ordinary reality. So in the shamanic cosmology I study, there's this idea, and this is pretty present cross-culturally with a lot of indigenous and shamanic cosmologies. There's this idea of the dreaming, which is that like basically the dreaming is the thing that is before the thing. It's the earth's dream of us as earth denizens on this planet. And in the dreaming, everything exists, and everything exists sort of in its most extravagant, beautiful, perfect, grounded expression. And we don't live in the dreaming, we live in current reality. And there's this tension always between the dreaming and current reality. So the dreaming is kind of like this, it's not quite the spirit world, because the spirit world is both, gives us access to both the dreaming and to current reality. The dreaming is sort of like this beautiful blueprint that all things are kind of dreaming out of. And it sort of transcends time and space. I think of it as primordial. And there's a series of books by Diane Dwan, who's a fantasy author I really love, especially as a kid. And in her books, these feline wizards visit this place called Time Heart, where you go sort of inwards dimensionally. And as you travel in, you become this more primordial version. So they start out as house cats, which are also, they're like talking house cats that are wizards. But then as they move towards Time Heart, they become these giant sort of like Paleolithic or like, like saber-tooth cats. And they Time Heart is this place where like everything kind of exists in this beautiful, perfect, essential archetypal form. And so the dreaming is one way in which we talk about that in our cosmology, in the cycle teachings. So the dream of who I am, like I said, it's not that drag can't make really meaningful interventions in people's lives, but it's not the wholeness of my dream. Drag is still a part of my dream. It's just not the whole thing, right? So coming into honest relationship with my grief and letting that drop me into that primordial place of collective loss and collective values, letting that teach me about my own personal values, what I really truly value in this life, has taught me and has given me more and more access to, and nourished my access to, that thing that is mine to do here. And not in the form of teacher or practitioner or whatever, in the energetic form, in its dreaming form, so that then I can wrestle with current reality and try to bring it into a form that works. Because it could work. It did work as drag queen for a certain amount of time, right? Like my drag was pretty wild. It was pretty ritual. And it was, as I'm sure you can imagine. And it was very collective. And it was very, like I did it with a group of people, it's a whole different thing. It just eventually I broke out of that and found that that energy was not fully expressing itself in that. And there was a grief in that, and a loss in that. And so that's the next exercise I want us to do, is to tease out how that connection feels and see what it wants to share with us, between the things that we're holding emotionally that want to move, just period, the grief that we may be holding that wants to move, and just like our relationship to grief in general, and our relationship with that bigness, that dream of who we are. So we'll do a little Qigong, and then we'll move into a meditation that comes from a practice that we call split screening. And the split screening, I'll speak you through. First, we'll do a thing where we just land in that place where we ended at the end of grounding. We're fully in current reality. We're fully in the body. And we're going to open to the bigness of what's breaking our hearts in this moment. And we're also going to lean into gratitude for all the things we love right now. And then we're going to hold that in one hand, that whole sort of thing, as if it were like a little snow globe. And then we're going to move into this more primordial place where we actually start to tap into the dreaming and really feel into the dreaming of the land where our ancestors were from, potentially, the dreaming of who we are if we got to live in a time and a place where there was everything we needed to express that, period. And the only challenges we received were going to just beautifully boost us in that expression, and nothing more or less than that. So that being the dreaming, then we're going to hold those two in tension. So the current reality and all of its complexity, and the dreaming and all of its beautiful complexity. And then from there, we're going to let it spark and continue to ignite flow and movement and stuff, and see what comes out of that, and harvest any sort of intuitions we can from it. So that's our task. Any other questions before we dive into that for the rest of our time together? And then we'll talk about it after for a bit. Hopefully we have time. Okay, let's do it. And let's just see. And it's a pretty open-ended task, right? This is not functionally, this is a little there's a function, but it's a little more unique to each of us versus grounding, which is more like just ground, just be grounded. So stand up if you're able, and it's to your capacity right now to do so. And like the other forms, you can also do these seated. And take a moment and just kind of free flow, rock weight back and forth, breathe, maybe bounce, come back to the body. See if you can come back to that place where we kind of ended our last Qigong routine. And if you're doing these later on your own, you can stitch them together and you can put these forms together. It'll be really interesting. Nice. And then notice where your hands are at, and bring your left hand to the low back, the back of your left hand touching the low back. And bring your right arm forward and start to scoop into a little bend in the knees. And sweep your right arm from the right to the left, scooping as if you were scooping the water. So instead of skimming the surface now, we're scooping some of the water up into our palm, palm turning up towards the left. Bring that up till about face height, and then just brush that water across your brow. Palm turning down now. Look to your right and just fling the water to the right. Letting the palm come down back into the water, bending the knees, scooping from this water of life, the yin river, we can call it. Scooping over to the left and then up. Brushing that nice, cool, refreshing water along your forehead. Flinging it gently to the right. This one is called stroking the yin river, at least how I was taught it. And remember, your knees don't have to bend super deep, just to the degree that feels good for you. You don't have to hunch into the river a lot with your arm. It could be a really casual, gentle stroke. And the hand is just sort of loosely cupped. There's this sort of paradox that I'm plunging my hand into the river of life, but I'm not able, it's not a cup. I'm not able to just like feast on it. I'm just wetting my hand and just gracefully stroking my palm with relief along my forehead. But it does make this sort of circular or ovular shape from the bottom all the way up to the forehead and to the left side and the right side. So you might see in your mind's eye or feel in your imagination this sort of circular quality, as if you're also creating this gentle river around you in a circle. And then switch sides. So on the next time you come down, bring your right hand to the low back. Let your left palm come forward and down and skim into the water. Same thing, we're just doing it with a different hand. Balance things out. It's quality of surrender here, a little bit of quality of cleansing. You might find, I think about in Harry Potter, where Dumbledore had that thing where he could pull memories out of his brain and store them in this like liquid bowl, like a scrying bowl. I kind of think of that. Not that I'm getting rid of my memories or my thoughts, just that I'm gently cleansing them, restoring their resonance with the waters of life, with the primordial yin river flowing past us, through us all the time. There's also a TCM connection here to the kidneys, which are said to have a connection to ocean and water. And so it can bring us down from any place where the emotions have become turbulent because they're stuck or blocked, where the adrenals, the adrenaline, the stress is a little too amped up. This form can be really good for balancing that. Also has to do with the wei qi, the energy around the skin that has a lot to do with our nerve or our immune system. So really good for cold season. Good. Now we'll transition now, bringing both hands back to the sides. Give them a little fluff upwards and then scoop them down and towards one another as if you were scooping the water from the center. Cup the palms, whichever one is comfortable can go on the bottom, turning them up, and slowly start to pull that energy up through your center. Around the height of your heart, starts to turn the palms so that they face inwards. And then they start to face down, as if what you were cupping has now grown roots and is now pushing the palms up. Like a great tree growing from inside of you. Let it push out the top of your head and then pull the hands apart lightly, softly. Let your wrists sag and go limp, kind of like monkey hands. Let them softly lilt down or float down like falling leaves to the side. Coming in again, bending the knees as you go to scoop the water of life through your center. Holding that energy up as if it's something that needs the help. Palms facing up until they start to face backwards at the heart level, and then the palms face down as if now your heart has taken over and is pushing this energy of life up and up and out. And then just gently fluff the hands. Legs are straight here at the top. Soft wrists, let the leaves flow, floating down. So I often think of this one like I'm sculpting a tree. And in the beginning, I scoop in and I have the soil and the seed. And I'm watering slowly, nourishing, praying, singing. But eventually that seed takes root, and where I come to at about heart level is that the branches are now pushing me up. And so no longer am I having to give it a boost, but actually I'm being boosted by it. And then I'm being pushed out into an expression I had no idea what was going to come. I had no idea what fruits these branches would bear. And then I just let them drop, giving them back to the environment. Really cleansing for the center chin. Nourishing, cultivating. It's like manifesting a vision. In the beginning, it's really challenging to get going. By the end, you kind of just have to like let go and hold on, right? Just like let it push you to completion. But the story in the tradition is that this one is called Carry Tiger. And it's about a monk who lived in a cave with a vicious tiger. And over time, through his practice, he made such peace with that tiger that they became best friends. And when the tiger died, the monk carried that tiger, though he was huge, right? Giant beast, all the way up to the top of the mountain so that he could be returned to the ecosystem naturally. And the metaphor is really about living your soul's purpose, about carrying, really first making peace with the wildness and the ferocity, the passion, and the capacity for violence that we all have. Eventually making peace with it to such a degree that it becomes a part of your practice. You're living your gifts, living your tiger nature in all the ways that you need to. Bringing that up to the mountain, sharing it to the world, giving it back to the cosmos. Then we'll transition here to the last form in this circuit. Actually, no, we'll do two more. So from here, the bottom, let the palms skim back out along the surface, bending the knees, and then let the palms start to get carried up. So palms are facing down, they're limp kind of at the sides, elbows, arms lifting up to the sides. At about shoulder height, turn the palms up and start to push up into the sky. It's kind of like a slower version of waterfall. Bring the palms together above the head. Let the back of one hand touch the palm of the other. And pull the palms facing back towards you, down across your face. Down around your heart. And then spread them down, now facing down towards the earth, and spread them across the surface again. So as they come back out, let them rise to the sides as if they're being carried by two great sunflowers. And at about shoulder or chest height, pluck the sunflower heads and pull them upwards. You want to give them as an offering to the sky, to the sun, to the divine. And what you receive for that offering is divine light, and let that divine light shower over you and through your hands, and pour it through your heart, and let it bring blessing and protection to your heart center so that you can feel your emotions for what they are. And then spread the gift of your heart and its medicine out along the earth, restoring it to the soil, restoring it to the ecosystem, to compost. The name that I was taught for this one is Phoenix Rising. So you can imagine being that phoenix rising from the ashes, soaring up to the sun, to the heart of the cosmos, incinerating yourself in that flame. And coming into the more yin quality as the hands come together and you bow into a sense of that humility that we visited before. You're bringing what you've learned, what you've experienced from the divine, that oneness into your heart protection. cleansing, nourishing, but also blessing the heart. You could do all of these for much longer than we're doing them. Traditionally, you would do each of them for 9 times in the morning, or 8 times if you're doing them at night. Or an odd number in the morning, an even number at night. Yang versus yin. We'll transition now after this last cycle through, coming back to similar to spreading water, but this time you won't spread out past your body. So from the edge of your body, skim your hands in and then up as if you were stroking gently a column that runs from just like your belly button to your sternum. And then stroke that column back down to its base, out to the side of your hips, and then back in. So it's a very narrow stroking. From the edge of your hips up that column, back down from just from the center of the chest, back down to about the hips. This one was taught to me as stroking the uncarved block, which is how we restore that energetic relationship to the part of us that is not changed, the part of us that is infinite. You might think of the part of us that lives in the dreaming, the blueprint for who you came here to be. Untouched by trauma, untouched by experience, also untouched by love, by heartbreak, just that part of us that is just the love of all things, the love of our gifts, the big dream of all the ways those gifts could express. That formless, kind of shapeless, pre-identity place. We can't live there forever, but it's good to have access to it in balance to our current self, who has been shaped by life, who does get heartbroken, who does love, who does long. Nice. Now let's transition out of the Qigong today with a bow. One fist, one palm. Soft bow of the head. Move towards our last little meditative piece now. So if you want to adjust back into a seat, or this one, you might find that you are more served doing it lying down, or get as comfortable with this one as you want to. It's a little less about the up and down. And staying with all that gooey Qigong energy and all of that oozy and potentially turbulent emotional energy that was maybe brought up by our discussion, or maybe is just there naturally, given who you are and where you are and what's going on in the world, what's going on in your life. Just take a few breaths and come back into body, come back to your grounding, reassess, reassert that sense of my responsibility is to be here and take up space, and my grounding cord is one expression of that. I'm given these resources of this body and all the things that feed and nourish it by the earth, and my energy body is one expression of that. Letting the sky, the divine energy swirl in and mix and mingle. Just feel the ecosystem that you are for a moment, the bigness that you are, the bigness of the cosmos that's holding you. And then coming down into your heart space, your heart center, take a moment and just feel into what is real for you right now. Feel into what is real in your physical environment, your home, where you live, those that you're in day-to-day relationship with, your community or communities. all the resources that you're given. And take a moment to just run the highlight reel for yourself of all the things you're grateful for. And you may not get an exhaustive list right now, so don't worry about it. This isn't about logic. This is just about what's really coming forward intuitively from your grounded space. Who do you really want to honor and thank? What really nourished you today or is nourishing you at this time in your life? And you might see gratitude kind of ripple out from your heart as just one of these beautiful neutral energies that we can send without losing anything. Just have kind of ample love and gratitude to send when we choose to click into that frequency. And you might also see it as a sense of connection from the heart. You have these things, or you're in relationship with these things or these beings. You might include the land. You might include your helping spirits, even if you don't know who they are. You might include the earth and the sky, all the different ways resources come to you. Animals, plants, insects, humans, earth, air, fire, water, all the ways in which reality has organized itself to keep you alive, to give you experiences, pleasure, joy, nourishment, satisfaction, money, food, roof over your head. And then expand that field of gratitude if it feels right, and include the whole planet. What are you grateful for on this planet? Even if it's not something you've ever encountered, even if it's not in your personal field of influence, but you just know it exists. What lifts your heart? What brings you joy about being on the planet at this time? And if that joy also brings up grief or sadness, that's also okay too. Just continue to let your emotions flow. Let them irrigate the system that you are. And then letting that gratitude continue to flow, letting those things continue to exist that you love and are grateful for and that really nourish your heart. Open now to the things that are really breaking your heart. Those may be world events. It may be a really micro human interest kind of story you read relative to a world event, or just something that really just fucking pissed you off or really shook you up. It might be something more close at hand, more regional, more national, more local. And it might also relate to something very personal that's breaking your heart and your family or your communities or your intimate relationships or just your life, your own relationship with yourself. But open to the heartbreak. Let the grief flow. Let any other emotions arise or qualities present themselves. Textures, tastes, sounds, sensations. And just continue to breathe and hold all of that in its bigness, in its complexity, in its heartbreak and its beauty. And please know that at any time you can come back to this, just this, as a practice of just feeling, and continue to ground everything that arises, and practice being held by the earth, by the sky, by the land around you. by spirit. But for now, for today, bottle this as like a sphere or a globe, that whole big complexity of current reality right now, and hold it in your left hand. And if you're like, that's kind of distracting, you can also just set it to the side. We'll pick it up in a bit. And now I invite you to open to your heart again. And let the primordial energy of heart, which is not just your heart, but is a heart, just heart, period, all hearts, start to melt your sense of self a bit. Letting the earth and the sky continue to hold you, letting anything that you're continuing to feel relative to current reality just continue to move. But let your sense of identity, of story, of logic, of language, of being soften and melt. And as you become pure energy, expand your heart now out to the essential, more archetypal, more primordial memory of the land around you. If you were not limited by time and space or by identity, if you were just human with a lowercase h, where would you live? What would your environment be? Open to the land being that primordial place. You can think of it as paradise. You can just think of it as like 100,000 years ago, Paleolithic. It might be an ancestral homeland. It might be that time period in the place where you live now. Don't worry about it mentally. Open to what reveals itself to your heart. Where is your primordial origin? What does the dreaming of the earth look like for you as an environment? What kind of trees and plants are there? What kind of climate? What kind of animals? What kind of birds? What kind of fish? Just, again, like the highlights reel, just let them stream past. You don't have to get caught up on naming them. See if you can live in that time before time, that experience before language. Still grounded, still being fed and whole, held by the earth and by the sky. And open to who your people are in that space and time. What does community look like? A community of humans that is completely harmonious with their environment, that lives in that ebb and flow, that beautiful constructive tension constantly between matter and spirit, between human needs and the ecosystem's health. In this imagining, how do your people organize? What is the cosmology that holds them? How do they make meaning and how do they procure food and resources? What kind of homes do they live in? Perhaps there are none. And as you let your nervous system and your body and your energy system and your whole self system just settle in to this primordial, mythic, human experience, Notice that you are being fed an essential fiber of that. Notice that there is a spark or a current or a seed or a shoot, some energy that is yours. How do you naturally fall into place and begin to organically serve this environment and this human reality? Follow your heart, your curiosity, your body, and your sense of grounding, and notice where you feel called to do. What quality of energy arises as you sink into this place and luxuriate in it? It might be really subtle. You might have to get real quiet and give it a lot of space and time to hear it or see it or feel it. It might be very elaborate and fully formed. Just continue to let your mind observe, let your body feel, let your heart hold, and let your heart be held by the earth and the sky and the land, the primordial memory. And please know that you can also come back to this practice by itself at any time and take as much time as you like with it. And for now, start to bundle that up in a sphere or a ball or an orb and bring that to your right hand. And take a moment now to hold, picking back up the current reality, all the things that you love about now, about you in this moment, and all that you have and are experiencing, and all the things that are breaking your heart. And bring that into relationship with the bigness and the beauty and the complexity, and maybe all that may be very challenging about the dreaming, about the primordial, about the mythic, the archetypal. And allow those energies to flow in you, because they're both yours, and kind of smoosh them together in your heart and see what arises. Notice what calls to you. Notice what explodes. Notice what melts. How does the dreaming of who you are and who humanity wants to be intersect and interact with the current reality of who you are now and what humanity is now? What energy does that spark in your heart? What grief does that bring into your awareness? What emotions arise that ask for space and attention and flow? What qualities or textures, symbols or tastes or sounds or experiences are sparked? See if you can hold all of this in your heart as a crucible that is made to hold complexity. See if both your body and your mind can orbit the heart, and the earth and the sky can hold you in this, no matter how big this might feel, or wild or challenging. And just notice what's there. What wants your attention? You don't have to figure this out now. Just hold what is being revealed as an energy that later on you can interpret into an action. But for now, just let it be an energy. You don't even have to have words for it yet or ever. Just let it be an energy. About a minute or so left here. So just continuing to breathe, to resource yourself. You might flow between current reality a little more on one side and the dreaming on the other. You might find yourself only in one right now. It's all good. Just letting yourself be heart-centered and earth-resourced, emotionally present and flowing with whatever's there. Then as you feel ready, prepare to shift gears. So come back into the self, rescaffold any quality of selfhood and identity that wants to come on. Really let what has shown itself to you continue to be there, but let the earth and the sky just rinse you out and bring in the gold and the silver, the deep grounded earth energy, the warm, loving sky energy in, and just kind of swirl and shift and restore, flush away anything that doesn't resonate anymore, hold and reinforce and contain anything that feels like it needs longer time to come back to it. And just give your body the signal you will come back, right? If there's something really big that needed a much longer process, promise that you'll come back to it, if that's a promise you can keep. And then shifting back into normative consciousness, open up to the awareness of the room around you, the air on your skin, the earth rising up, supporting you underneath whatever you're sitting on, standing on. And we'll come into a little bit of a conversation space. I kind of went over with my chattiness earlier, so we may go over time a little bit. So if you have to bow out, just feel free to bow out. I'll try to keep it under 10 minutes over. But just for those that are here live, any questions or shares that came up, anything really groovy that really stuck out about that experience, or anything that's feeling like it just wants to be shared in this container? And for those joining us from home, if you feel like you want to email those shares, go ahead and do so. For me, I'm continually struck by that resonance of familiarity when I drop into that more primordial sense of who I am and what I do, or when I start to do something that feels unfamiliar, but I'm like, oh, wait, but I do know this energy. It's alive in a lot of what I do day to day. It's just I do a very contemporary, modernized version. I'm on Zoom instead of like around a campfire, but so that I find really interesting. And I find myself really interested too as I open to the bigness of current reality. That, really when I take some time and space with that, the grief and the heartbreak does sit in context with the other stuff. And the joy sits in context with the grief. And sometimes they're really close at hand because I see both horrible things happening and people really rising, standing up for justice that weren't doing it before, waking up to, reality in ways they weren't before. And it's just like, wow, it's all so close together. It's also human. So that's a thing that I find really striking when I do that practice. So the ways in which you can work with this going forward, I would do it after grounding if it feels helpful and useful. And if the current reality piece is really big and in your face, you might spend some time with that. If it's the piece that's just grief and emotions, you might spend some time restoring flow with that. If it's harder for you to lean into the gratitude place, if you like really live in the grief all the time, then you might lean more into the gratitude place, the joy place. By that same token, if you are really feeling super rooted in current reality, but really cut off from how can I possibly help or do anything, then I would spend some more time with the dreaming and get a little sense of that. Oh, this is this energy that's like me and mine to do, and start to kind of play with where you feel that throughout your day, play with like how that arises for you, what form that might take, what kind of qualities that has. And then you might bring that back to the current reality and see, oh, there's a place where I could take an action, or there's a thing where I have a gift that wants to be expressed in some way, or a relationship in which that might be really available, or a community or a sphere of influence I have, if it's a job, if it's a community group, if it's, if it's a social media account, whatever it is, there's many ways. Actions can also look like rest. They can look like self-care. They can look like healing we need to have. They can look like tough conversations. They can look like a piece of art that needs to be made. So the essence is kind of bringing these energies, letting the emotional energies flow on their own rhythm and routine, letting the grounding and our larger practice like really nourish our flow, right? And then letting the energies that really want to kind of arise from that flow out into our actions, and taking actions particularly based on what we value. So my hope is that over time, if you sit with this, or even just the idea has brought you a little closer to the grain of, it's not just that I'm grieving a loss, but that I'm noticing through that grief that there's something I really care about. And that the grounding can then resource you, your practice, and all the other practices you already do, all the other self-care you already do, all the other development and stuff you do, all the other transformational processes you're in, can serve to continue to kind of spark in you what's mine to give to this big, messy, beautiful, heartbreaking complexity of now. What's my piece of the dream to hold and remember that, like, when humans are at their best in harmony with land, humans do this. And how do I do that now? Because that for me is how I kind of interpret, and I think it's not just my interpretation, but for me, that's how I'm holding what it is to be shamanic. What makes a shamanic culture different than others is that essential tending of the function of a human, which is humans are here for a reason. We have stuff to do. We're not just a barons, that's here to just like drain resources and drop atomic bombs and crap. It's like we're also not here to dominate and master. We're here to be in flow with life and give our gifts. And we're all here to serve our essential piece of the dreaming. Because if we don't, then the dreaming never gets to experience itself in that way. And the oneness never really gets to have that experience. And we give that back when we die, which is part of that big mystery when we grieve something that we lost. Because there's that imperfection of, who knows how fully that person expressed their purpose. whether they died too young or they died old, but they were saddled by a bunch of stuff, that really hobbled their capacity to live their dream. But we grieve all of it, and we grieve the mystery inside of it, and we grieve the gift of free will that we're all given to do that as a human in our life. And in holding that complexity, I think we continue to restore flow of that energy so that it doesn't get stagnant. In grieving that grief, it helps us to come back to what we need to do so that we don't get stuck and stagnant. And then we also come back to that place where, or at least I do, no one, no matter how beautifully resourced they are in life, no matter how serendipitous their relationship with spirit was, no one can truly live the full, huge, archetypal, mythic dreaming of their purpose. That's why we have the myths. That's why the dreaming exists, right? We are not the dreaming. We're the humans. We're the now. So there's that beautiful tension always around that. But as we move forward, if any of this stuff brings up stuff that you don't know how to hold, disclaimer, please reach out. If it feels untenable, if it feels like unsustainable, if it feels like it's derailing your life, then that's a time to really ask for help. So if you feel like if you feel like the practices are taking you to a place where you actually are not safe, not feeling better, please discontinue them. Reach out for help and support. I can offer you some resources from there. If you feel like it's just getting you to a place where there's some uncomfortable stuff, there's some interesting stuff, there's some potentially painful stuff, what might I do with that? Also reach out and just share with me what's going on, and I might have some recommendations. Whether that's working with me personally one-on-one or with others, that are in my networks or my teachers or other senior folks in my networks. And also don't hesitate to reach out to your friends, to your loved ones, to your community to bring this stuff out. Again, share the videos, come back to the videos as practice tools as long as you need to, and then maybe, move on and do your own thing. Not do your own thing, but internalize them to the degree that then you can do your qigong and sit down in your meditation without having to have me on YouTube talking at you, where you can guide yourself through it. And if that means you include your housemates, your loved ones, great. And again, if there's folks that you really think might want to intersect with this and just didn't get the emails or whatever, just tell them to send me an email, and I can bring them into our circle more consciously from there. But I really want to appreciate you all for being here, both those that are here live and those that are joining later via the recording. It's been such a gift to share this stuff with you. It's my sincere hope that it's helpful, that it brings you juice and sustenance and nourishment and grounding, and that it continues to evolve and carry you downstream to wherever your truth and your reality and your energy and your emotions and your grief are asking you to be right now. Any other questions, comments, shares before we close? Kind of a squishy rainy day to move into for those of us that are joining on Sunday, but I think it's kind of perfect. And thank you again for being here. I give honoring to the lineages that have held us and supported us and that have fed us in this work, to the earth below and the sky above and the spirits of each direction, to our helping spirits and ancestral helping spirits, to our land spirit helpers and the great spirits of these lands that claim us, and to the helpers of those places and the ancestral tenders of those places, to the earth and the air and the fire and the water, the fire for holding our center and the spirit of technology for holding us in space and time and helping us to do it in a good way that doesn't burn out our nervous systems. Thank you so much. And to all the other beings and energies that resourced us in this work, and to that great, mysterious, wild dream that we access in dreams, in grief, in heartbreak, in joy, in love and pleasure, and all the other human full rainbow range of experience. Thank you so, so much for dreaming us. Go if you must, stay if you can. We release you with all of our love and with all of our gratitude. And I invite you to signal to your body that you now step out of this energetic space and you move into the rest of your day, whatever that holds. And to resource from earth and sky to the degree that you need to resource yourself to safely move into your day. And to release anything that doesn't need to come with you. Let that just be given back to the earth. And we formally dissolve this circle and give that energy back to the ecosystem. Thank you so, so much. Thank you all so much. Hope to see you soon in some form, in some place and time.
Audio now unmuted.
Thanks a lot.